Turning now to a developing story, University of Pennsylvania President Liz Magill has resigned following her testimony before a House committee over how the college handles calls for the genocide of Jews.
I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes.
You might remember that video from last week as the presidents of Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania, as well as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, were invited to speak to members of the House to discuss their responses to protests on their campuses as anti-Semitism and Islamophobia rise amid the war in Gaza. Debates about free speech versus student safety at colleges continue to be had across the country. Students on both sides say they've been subjected to threatening rhetoric since the Hamas attack on Israel spurred this war now more than 2 months ago. So joining us now live to discuss this issue is Jeremy Young, the Freedom to Learn Program Director at Penn America. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I know your organization works every day with the issue of free speech. So in terms of what we've seen over the last couple of months, has the approach that these schools have taken fallen short of what we should expect?
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. I mean, I think that this is a very challenging environment for higher education leaders and students and faculty. We're in a situation where suddenly a free speech incident is happening on campuses all across the country every day, multiple incidents per day. And we've seen a lot of presidents handle it well, and we've seen a lot of presidents, frankly, flail. I think, obviously the presidents at that hearing didn't give the right answer when they were asked that question, calling open calls for genocide, while we haven't, exactly heard it phrased in those terms, would be against most codes of conduct. They would create a sort of harassing environment. But that doesn't mean that the solution we're increasingly hearing coming from critics of universities, the solution of censoring speech is the way to solve the problem.
And I think of these schools. I mean, you have Harvard, Penn, MIT. These are three of the most prestigious in our country, and the leaders of them incredibly accomplished in the world of academia. Why is it when they're asked this question? I mean, this isn't the first time, if you work in higher education, where you deal with the issue of free speech. It's a big part of what you do. Why is it they're struggling to answer the question?
I think they're giving a technically correct answer that it doesn't violate, that it doesn't, absolve the university from providing First Amendment protections just because the speech is abhorrent. But they're failing to point out that the speech is in fact abhorrent, that it creates an unsafe environment for students, that it makes students and faculty deeply uncomfortable. And there's no reason that a university can't call out anti-Semitism for what it is, an abhorrent belief system that is seriously damaging to any kind of reasoned discussion or dialogue on campus. There's no reason a university can't provide education or support for students or information sessions about what anti-Semitism is and what's going on in the Middle East. These are all important components of a response, but they're not the response that's called for in that moment. I mean, I think in some ways that hearing was a frame-up. I think it was for presidents are being asked to give a yes-no answer to something that's very complicated, but also I don't think the president's answered it correctly.
And because I think of the, I'm sure, interior politics that are at play at these schools where you have donors and alumni, groups that have not been happy. I know this evening the Harvard Corporation Board is meeting about its president, Claudine Gay, and what her future will look like. Is having these leaders resign, is that the answer as far as the response that we're seeing from what happened at this hearing and how so many schools are responding? Or does that potentially set a precedent for future issues that come to light?
I think it's up to a university and its board of governors whether or not it wants to maintain a president in that kind of position. But I will say firing presidents in the immediate aftermath of politicians calling for their firing is a deeply dangerous precedent. And it's part and parcel of what we're seeing around the country in terms of threats to free expression in universities from the government. I mean, just this weekend, we saw an attempt in the Wisconsin system to force, a university president to cut DEI positions in exchange for giving faculty raises. Politicians trying to enforce that. We saw in Florida, the Commissioner of Education saying that he removed sociology from all general ed curricula in the state because it's a woke ideology and not a real subject. I mean, these are real serious threats to free expression in higher education. And, kowtowing to politicians who want to impose ideological control on universities is not the way to combat anti-Semitism. It's not the way to create a healthy space for intellectual dialogue on campus or to protect students who need to have these kind of conversations in a safe environment. I mean, just this week, the Wharton School, in addition to calling for the President Magill's firing, called for a new free speech policy that would ban hate speech, which is something that we've opposed really across the country when it's come up at universities. It really is an infringement on the First Amendment. This isn't the solution. The solution is dialogue, education, support.
If you can sum up in 30 seconds, and that may be an unfair question, where is that line in the sand where we have free speech, we have hate speech, and how we should see it moving forward?
Hate speech is not illegal, but calling for genocide is, in fact, in many cases, a violation it creates a sort of unsafe environment on campus or an unhealthy environment. I think this is very clear in university policies. There's no reason that this has to be sort of so wishy-washy when presidents talk about it, and there's no reason that we need to be claiming presidential heads in order to solve this problem.
All right, Jeremy Young with PEN America, thank you so much for your time and insight. It is such an important conversation that's happening in so many parts of the country.